Imagine an entire universe contained within a few meters of warm, shallow water. A universe more densely populated and more diverse than any rainforest on land. A universe built not by a single architect, but by millions of tiny creatures working together, each one contributing its part to create something vast and beautiful and complex. This universe exists. It's called a coral reef. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, yet they're home to about 25% of all marine species. In a single reef, you can find thousands of species of fish, thousands of species of invertebrates, plants, and creatures so small they're invisible to the naked eye. All of this life, all of this abundance, all of this incredible biodiversity exists in shallow tropical waters where sunlight penetrates and warmth reigns. Most people have never seen a coral reef. Most people live far from the equator, in climates where tropical seas seem like a fantasy. But if you've ever seen a photograph of a coral reef, you know what an otherworldly place it is. Colors that seem almost impossible. Brilliant reds and oranges and yellows and blues and purples. Forms that seem almost sculptural. Branching corals that look like trees. Mound corals that look like giant brains. Delicate corals that look like lace. And all around the corals, fish and invertebrates and plants, creating a tapestry of life so dense that there seems to be no empty space. Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Lab Channel. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've wondered about the abundance of life in coral reefs. Maybe you've dreamed of visiting tropical waters. Maybe you simply want to fall asleep thinking about a world so vibrant and alive that it seems like a dream itself. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. There's nothing you need to do except let your body rest, let your mind slow down, and let your thoughts drift toward a world of warmth and color and life. Because tonight, we're exploring the coral reef, one of the most extraordinary ecosystems on Earth, a world where life thrives in abundance, where symbiosis and cooperation are the foundations of survival, where beauty and complexity are woven together in ways that nature has perfected over millions of years. If these quiet explorations help you rest, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more dreamers find their way here too. Now, if you're ready, let's begin our journey into the reef. Coral is an animal, not a plant. This surprises many people. Corals look like plants. They're rooted to the ground. They come in many bright colors. They have flower-like polyps. But corals are animals. They're part of a group called cnidarians, the same group that includes jellyfish and sea anemones. Each coral is made up of thousands of tiny animals called polyps. Each polyp is a simple creature, a small mouth surrounded by tentacles, a stomach, and not much else. Yet together, thousands or millions of these simple creatures create a single coral colony that can weigh tons and live for hundreds of years. A coral polyp is a remarkable creature despite its simplicity. It has a mouth surrounded by tentacles, and at the base of each tentacle are stinging cells called nematocysts. These stinging cells are used to capture small prey, tiny zooplankton drifting in the water. When a zooplankton touches a tentacle, the nematocyst fires, injecting venom into the prey and paralyzing it. The tentacles then move the prey toward the mouth, and the polyp swallows it. This feeding happens day and night, thousands of times per polyp per day. But feeding on zooplankton alone wouldn't be enough to support the tremendous growth and energy demands of a coral colony. Corals have evolved another strategy, a partnership with algae. Zooxanthellae are photosynthetic algae that live inside the cells of coral polyps. These algae are the secret to corals' success. The algae use sunlight to create sugars through photosynthesis. These sugars are shared with the coral polyp, providing energy. In return, the coral polyp protects the algae and provides it with nutrients. It's a perfect partnership. The algae get a safe home and access to sunlight, and the coral gets the energy to grow and thrive. Without zooxanthellae, most reef corals couldn't survive. They would have just enough energy to maintain themselves, but not enough to grow and build their skeletons. The partnership with algae is what allows coral reefs to be so productive and abundant. The color of corals comes from both the coral's own pigments and the pigments of the zooxanthellae living inside. Different corals have different pigments, which is why corals come in such a stunning array of colors. Corals can be red, orange, yellow, blue, purple, green, brown, white, or combinations of these colors. The colors serve multiple purposes. Some pigments protect the coral from ultraviolet light. Some pigments help the zooxanthellae capture light for photosynthesis. Some pigments are just a byproduct of the coral's metabolism. Whatever their function, the colors make coral reefs some of the most visually stunning ecosystems on Earth. Coral skeletons are made of calcium carbonate, the same material that makes up seashells and chalk. As a coral polyp grows, it secretes calcium carbonate, building a skeleton around itself. Over time, as more and more polyps add to the skeleton, a solid structure forms. Different coral species build different shapes. Some build branching structures that look like trees. Some build mound or dome-shaped structures. Some build encrusting structures that grow flat along the substrate. Some build plate-like structures. These different growth forms are shaped by evolution and by the environment. Branching corals take up more space and capture more light. Mound corals are more resilient to wave damage. The diversity of coral growth forms contributes to the structural complexity of the reef. A coral colony begins when a single coral polyp settles on the substrate and begins to build a skeleton. Through asexual reproduction, budding, the polyp divides and creates new polyps. Each new polyp adds to the skeleton. Over months and years, a colony grows. A colony can consist of thousands or millions of polyps, all genetically identical and all connected to each other. When you look at a coral colony, you're looking at a single organism. A superorganism made up of countless individual polyps that have divided and specialized. It's a living sculpture that grows upward and outward, always reaching toward the light. Sexual reproduction in corals happens when the colony is mature enough to produce sperm and eggs. Many corals are hermaphrodites, meaning individual polyps can produce both sperm and eggs. Corals reproduce sexually in synchronized events where many corals on the same reef release their sperm and eggs at the same time. This synchronization is triggered by environmental cues. Perhaps the phase of the moon, or the temperature of the water, or the timing of sunset. When sperm and eggs are released into the water and meet, they fuse to create larvae. These larvae drift on currents, potentially traveling great distances. If a larva finds a suitable substrate, a hard surface where it can settle, it attaches and begins to build a new colony. Coral larvae are tiny, often less than 1 millimeter across. They drift passively on ocean currents, buffeted by waves and currents, completely at the mercy of the ocean. Most die without ever finding suitable settlement substrate. But the few that find a good place to settle can grow into colonies that live for hundreds or even thousands of years. The dispersal of coral larvae is one of the ways that coral reefs maintain genetic diversity and ensure that reefs in different locations are connected. Hermatypic corals are reef-building corals that contain zooxanthellae. These are the corals that form the structure of the reef and create the majority of reef biodiversity. Without hermatypic corals, there would be no coral reefs as we know them. Hermatypic corals are corals that don't contain zooxanthellae. These corals are found in deeper waters where sunlight doesn't penetrate, or in areas where light is limited. Without zooxanthellae, they can't rely on photosynthesis. Instead, they feed solely on zooplankton captured by their polyps. Hermatypic corals are less abundant and less diverse than hermatypic corals, and they grow much more slowly. Stony corals, also called scleractinians, are the primary reef-building corals. They build hard skeletons made of calcium carbonate. The structures they build are what we typically think of when we picture a coral reef. Soft corals and sea fans are corals that don't build hard skeletons. Instead, they have flexible bodies filled with water and supported by tiny skeletal elements. Soft corals sway and wave in the current, and they can be quite beautiful. But they don't build reef structures the way stony corals do. Gorgonians are corals that build branching structures similar to trees, and they're often found in deeper water than stony corals. The reef framework is built by corals, but it's also strengthened by coralline algae that produce calcium carbonate and effectively cement the reef together. Coralline algae grow over dead coral and on the reef surface, binding the reef structure into a cohesive unit. Fish and invertebrates bore into the reef, creating crevices and caves. Other organisms settle on the reef surface. Over time, a complex three-dimensional structure forms, with countless microhabitats and niches. This structural complexity is one of the reasons why coral reefs support such tremendous biodiversity. Coral bleaching is the process where corals expel their zooxanthellae and turn white. This happens when corals are stressed, usually by high water temperature. When water temperature rises too much, even just a few degrees above normal, the zooxanthellae become stressed and produce reactive oxygen species that damage the symbiosis. The coral responds by expelling the zooxanthellae. The coral loses its color and its food supply, turning white as the white skeleton shows through. If conditions return to normal quickly, corals can regain their zooxanthellae and recover. But if stress continues, the starving coral will die. Coral bleaching has become increasingly common in recent decades due to climate change. Warming ocean temperatures are causing mass bleaching events affecting reefs worldwide. During the 2016 mass bleaching event, coral reefs around the world lost vast areas of living coral, some of the most pristine reefs on Earth, places that had been relatively protected from human disturbance. Saw the majority of their corals die. Coral bleaching is now the most visible and most alarming impact of climate change on marine ecosystems. The causes of coral bleaching extend beyond temperature. Disease can cause bleaching. Pollution can cause bleaching. Low salinity from freshwater input can cause bleaching. High salinity from evaporation can cause bleaching. Extreme weather events can cause bleaching. Basically, anything that stresses the coral can potentially trigger bleaching. But the most significant cause globally is rising water temperature due to climate change. As long as ocean temperatures continue to rise, coral bleaching will continue to be a major threat to reef ecosystems. Recovery from bleaching is possible but uncertain. If a reef survives a bleaching event and water conditions improve, corals can regain their zooxanthellae and return to health. But repeated bleaching events weaken corals, and recovery becomes less likely. Additionally, the longer corals remain bleached, the more likely they are to die from disease or starvation. Mass bleaching events also create a cascade of ecological effects. Herbivorous fish populations decline because there's less algae for them to eat. Predatory fish populations decline because there's less prey, and the reef's ability to resist other stressors declines. Recovery from major bleaching events can take decades or longer. Some corals are more resistant to bleaching than others. Certain species have traits that make them more tolerant of high temperatures. Some corals have zooxanthellae strains that are more heat tolerant. Scientists are studying these resilient corals and heat-tolerant zooxanthellae to understand what makes them resistant and whether these traits could be transferred to more susceptible corals. There's hope that selective breeding or even genetic modification could create more bleaching-resistant corals, though this remains controversial. Fish in coral reefs have evolved to exploit the reef structure and resources in countless ways. Some fish graze on algae that grows on the reef. Some fish hunt other fish. Some fish feed on zooplankton drifting in the water. Some fish pick parasites and dead skin off other fish in a behavior called cleaning. Some fish hide in coral crevices during the day and emerge at night to feed. The diversity of feeding strategies matches the diversity of niches available in the reef. For every resource or habitat available, there seems to be a fish species that has evolved to exploit it. Parrotfish are herbivorous fish that feed on algae growing on coral. As they feed, they bite chunks out of the reef structure, crunching up coral and algae together. The coral and rock pass through the fish's digestive system and are expelled as sand. Much of the sand on tropical beaches comes from parrotfish feces. This might seem destructive, and it can be if there are too many parrotfish. But in balanced reef ecosystems, parrotfish play a crucial role. They prevent algae from smothering coral. Algae can overgrow coral and kill it. By grazing on algae, parrotfish keep algae populations in check and allow coral to thrive. Dam shellfish are small, aggressive fish that defend territories on the reef. They chase away much larger fish that enter their territory. Despite their small size, dam shellfish can be remarkably effective at defending their space. Some dam shellfish farms algae. They actively encourage the growth of specific algae species in their territory and then feed on the algae. It's a form of agriculture. Other dam shellfish feed on zooplankton and small organisms that drift into their territory. The aggressive defense of territory by dam shellfish is so effective that dam shellfish territories can be mapped and studied. Wrasses are colorful fish that live on reefs and exhibit remarkable behavior and intelligence. Some wrasses are cleaners. They pick parasites and dead skin off other fish. Some wrasses hunt small invertebrates hiding in crevices. Some wrasses change sex during their lifetime. A female can become a male if the existing male dies. The sex change in wrasses is complete. The fish changes not just physically but behaviorally and hormonally. It's one of the most dramatic examples of sexual plasticity in the animal kingdom. Groupers are large predatory fish that hunt other fish on the reef. They're important top predators, and their presence helps control populations of smaller fish. Groupers are intelligent and can be observed engaging in complex behaviors. Some groupers are known to hunt in pairs or small groups, coordinating their attacks on prey. Some groupers make use of tools. They've been observed using small rocks to create shelter or to dig in the sediment while hunting. The intelligence and hunting sophistication of groupers rivals that of much larger predatory fish. Butterflyfish are small, colorful fish that live on reefs and feed on a variety of food sources. Some butterflyfish are monogamous, meaning they form pair bonds that last for years or even for life. A pair of butterflyfish will defend territory together and hunt together. The fidelity of some butterflyfish pairs is extraordinary. If one fish is removed, the remaining fish often refuses to accept a new partner. Monogamy in fish is relatively rare, and the monogamous behavior of butterflyfish makes them fascinating to study. Triggerfish are medium-sized fish with strong teeth that can crunch through hard, shelled invertebrates. Triggerfish are known for their aggressive behavior toward other fish and even toward humans who get too close. Some triggerfish are so aggressive that they're a danger to divers who enter their territory. Triggerfish are not particularly large or powerful compared to many other predators, but their aggression and territorial behavior make them formidable inhabitants of their reef territory. Some triggerfish are known to blow jets of water at prey hiding in sand, exposing the prey and making it vulnerable to attack. Invertebrates are the most diverse group of organisms in coral reefs. Fish are dramatic and visible, but invertebrates make up the majority of species and in many ways are the foundation of reef ecosystems. She stars are common reef invertebrates, ranging from small species a few centimeters across to large species over a meter in diameter. Sea stars are predators, scavengers, or herbivores depending on the species. Some sea stars feed on coral polyps, which can damage coral. One particular sea star, the crown of thorns, has caused significant damage to some reefs by feeding on coral polyps and causing coral mortality. Sea urchins are round, spiny invertebrates that feed on algae and seaweed. In healthy reef ecosystems, sea urchins are numerous and play an important role in controlling algae growth. But when fish populations decline due to overfishing, sea urchin predators become scarce and sea urchin populations can explode. When sea urchin populations get too large, they can overgraze algae so intensely that the reef becomes denuded of algae. This doesn't necessarily kill coral. Coral feeds on zooplankton, not algae. But it changes the ecosystem. In some reefs, periodic die-offs of sea urchins have been observed, sometimes from disease, which causes an algae boom and subsequent changes to the reef community. Lobsters are large crustaceans that hide in reef crevices during the day and emerge to feed at night. They're predators that hunt small fish and invertebrates. Some species of lobster are commercially harvested, and overfishing of lobster has affected some reefs. Lobsters can live for decades, and some individuals may be over 100 years old. The age of a lobster can be estimated by various means, and some very old lobsters have been found inhabiting the same reef for their entire lives. Shrimp are small crustaceans that hide in reef crevices and among coral branches. Many shrimp species have formed cleaning relationships with fish. The fish visits the shrimp's location, and the shrimp cleans parasites and dead skin off the fish. This behavior is fascinating to observe. A fish will often hold still while a shrimp walks over its body, picking at parasites. This cleaning relationship is mutually beneficial. The shrimp gets food, and the fish gets cleaned. Sea cucumbers are elongated, tubular invertebrates that crawl along the reef bottom and feed on organic material in sediment. They're not the most visually impressive reef creatures, but they play an important role in reef ecosystems by processing sediment and recycling nutrients. Some sea cucumbers are harvested commercially, and overfishing of sea cucumbers has affected some reef ecosystems. The removal of sea cucumbers can disrupt nutrient cycling on the reef. Mollusks are a diverse group of invertebrates that includes clams, snails, squid, and octopuses. Some mollusks are producers, like algae-eating snails. Some are predators, like reef-dwelling octopuses. Some are filter feeders, like giant clams. The diversity of mollusks in coral reefs is remarkable. Some molt mollusks have shells with beautiful patterns. Some have brilliant colors. Some have evolved remarkable camouflage. Squid in particular are known for their ability to change color and pattern within seconds, allowing them to hide or communicate with other squid. Giant clams are the largest clams in the world, with shells that can reach over 1 meter across and weigh hundreds of kilograms. Giant clams are filter feeders, taking in water and removing plankton. But they also host zooxanthellae, much like corals do, and they can derive significant energy from photosynthesis. Giant clams are long-lived. Some individuals are known to live over 100 years. Giant clams have been overharvested in many regions, and populations have declined significantly. Some populations have been so depleted that reefs have lost their giant clams entirely, which affects the ecosystem in ways that are still being understood. Nudibranchs are small sea slugs that live on reefs and feed on corals, sponges, and other organisms. They're known for their brilliant colors and elaborate appendages. Different nudibranch species have evolved to feed on specific types of coral or sponge. Some nudibranchs can store the stinging cells of the corals they eat and use them for their own defense. It's an example of sequestration, taking toxic compounds from food and storing them to use for defense. Nudibranchs are popular with underwater photographers because of their beauty, and some reef locations have become destinations for photographer tourists, specifically to photograph nudibranchs. Sponges are among the most ancient and most successful organisms on reefs. Some sponge species can grow quite large, and some individual sponges can live for hundreds of years. Sponges are filter feeders, drawing water through tiny pores and removing plankton. Some sponges are so efficient at filtering that they can process thousands of liters of water per day. This filtering process is crucial for reef health. Sponges are essentially cleaning the water, removing plankton that might otherwise smother coral. Coral disease is an increasing problem on reefs worldwide. Diseases caused by bacteria, fungi, and other pathogens can spread through coral populations. Some diseases kill coral slowly, visible as a band of bleached or dead coral that gradually spreads across a colony. Other diseases kill coral more rapidly. In some reefs, disease has become as significant a threat to coral survival as bleaching. The causes of coral disease are complex and involve factors like water quality, temperature, pollution, and the health of corals' immune systems. Warmer water seems to increase the prevalence of some diseases, suggesting that climate change may be indirectly increasing disease pressure on reefs. Algal blooms happen when conditions favor rapid growth of algae. These blooms can smother coral and shade out benthic algae that herbivorous fish feed on. Nutrient pollution from agricultural runoff or sewage can trigger algal blooms by providing excess nutrients that algae need to grow. When algal blooms smother coral, the coral dies. As coral dies, the habitat becomes less complex and biodiversity declines. Algal blooms can be so severe that they completely transform a reef from a coral-dominated ecosystem to an algae-dominated ecosystem, a shift that might be difficult or impossible to reverse. Overfishing affects reefs in multiple ways. When herbivorous fish are removed from a reef through overfishing, algae growth increases because there are fewer fish to eat the algae. When large predatory fish are removed, the populations of smaller fish can increase explosively. These changes cascade through the ecosystem, altering community structure in ways that often favor the reef's decline. Overfishing of sharks has had particularly significant impacts on some reefs, as sharks are top predators that play crucial roles in ecosystem regulation. Fishing with dynamite or cyanide, though technically illegal in most places, still happens on some reefs. Dynamite destroys the reef structure itself, killing coral and creating rubble. Cyanide fishing is targeted at capturing live fish for the aquarium trade, but the cyanide also kills corals and other reef organisms. These destructive fishing practices have devastated some reefs, particularly in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Recovery from dynamite or cyanide fishing can take decades or longer. Symbiosis is the foundation of coral reef ecosystems. The symbiosis between coral and zooxanthellae is just the beginning. Corals live in close association with bacteria and other microorganisms. Many reef fish live in symbiotic relationships with other fish. Some fish live inside anemones, receiving protection in exchange for helping the anemone. The complexity of symbiotic relationships in coral reefs is still being discovered. Many symbioses likely exist that we haven't yet identified because they happen in microscopic scales or in ways we haven't been able to observe directly. Mutualism, where both partners benefit, is common in coral reefs. The coral zooxanthellae relationship is mutual. The cleaning relationship between fish and fish is mutual. The relationship between anemones and clownfish is mutual. The anemone provides protection, and the clownfish provides food and helps clean parasites off the anemone. Examples of mutualism abound in coral reefs, suggesting that cooperation and mutual benefit are keys to reef success. Competition for resources also exists in coral reefs. Different fish species compete for the same food. Different corals compete for space and light. When one competitor gains an advantage, it can rapidly dominate. For instance, if algae-eating fish are removed, fast-growing algae can rapidly overgrow and shade out corals. The balance between competition and cooperation in reef ecosystems is delicate. Predation structures reef ecosystems. Predators control herbivore populations, which affects algae control. Predators control prey fish populations, affecting community structure. The removal of predators through overfishing can cascade through ecosystems, causing unexpected changes far from the top of the food chain. Understanding predation is crucial for understanding reef ecology and for managing reefs sustainably. Recruitment is the process by which larvae settle and begin growing. For coral, successful recruitment means that larvae find suitable substrate and begin building a new colony. For fish, successful recruitment means that young fish find suitable habitat and survive to adulthood. Recruitment fluctuates with environmental conditions, with some years being excellent for recruitment and other years being poor. Good recruitment years are crucial for reef recovery and for maintaining population levels. Poor recruitment years can lead to population declines. Keystone species are species whose presence has an outsized effect on ecosystems. The removal of a keystone species can cause far greater changes than would be expected from the loss of one species. Sea urchins can be keystone species. Their grazing on algae can determine whether a reef is algae-dominated or coral-dominated. Parrotfish can be keystone species for similar reasons. The identification of keystone species is crucial for reef conservation because protecting these species has disproportionate benefits for reef health. The history of coral reefs is one of climate fluctuation and adaptation. Throughout Earth's history, reefs have existed and disappeared as climate changed. During ice ages, sea levels dropped, and many reefs that existed on continental shelves were left high and dry. As ice ages ended and sea levels rose, new reefs established on the exposed surfaces of the old reefs. Ancient reefs that lived millions of years ago are now preserved in the rock record, providing scientists with information about past climates and past ocean chemistry. Fossil reefs tell stories of past ecosystems. By studying fossil corals, paleontologists can determine what conditions existed when the reefs were alive. They can estimate water temperature, water chemistry, and the types of creatures that lived in the reef. Some fossil reefs show evidence of rapid changes in environmental conditions, followed by coral death. These events likely correspond to rapid climate change in Earth's past. Studying ancient reefs helps us understand how reefs respond to climate change and gives us perspective on the changes happening today. The geographic distribution of coral reefs is limited by temperature. Corals thrive in warm tropical water, typically between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius. This limits coral reefs to the tropical oceans. The Caribbean, the Indo-Pacific region, the Red Sea, the Coral Triangle. These are the regions where coral reefs are most abundant. As ocean temperatures change due to climate change, the distribution of coral reefs is likely to shift. Some reefs in warm locations might become too hot for corals to survive. New reefs might establish in locations that were previously too cold. The depth distribution of coral reefs is limited by light. Most reef-building corals need light because of their dependence on photosynthetic zooxanthellae. Most reefs exist in shallow water, from the surface down to about 50 meters. Some corals can survive deeper, but without zooxanthellae, they can't build reefs. The edge of the reef, the transition zone between the shallow reef and the deep water, is called the reef slope, and it hosts a different community of corals and other organisms than the shallow reef. Fringing reefs are reefs that grow directly along the shore. They're close to land and are often affected by terrestrial influences like river runoff and pollution. Barrier reefs are separated from the shore by a lagoon, and they can be much larger and more complex than fringing reefs. Atoll reefs are circular or oval-shaped reefs with a lagoon in the center, typically found in the open ocean. The shape of a reef, whether it's fringing, barrier, or atoll, is determined by the geology of the substrate and the history of sea level changes. The Great Barrier Reef is the world's largest coral reef system, stretching for over 2,000 kilometers along the coast of Australia. It's so large that it's visible from space. The Great Barrier Reef is home to thousands of species and is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. It's also one of the most studied reefs, and scientists have accumulated vast amounts of data about it. The Great Barrier Reef has suffered significant coral bleaching events in recent years, and much of it has been affected by climate change. The fate of the Great Barrier Reef is being closely watched as an indicator of the effects of climate change on coral reefs globally. The Coral Triangle is a region of the Indo-Pacific centered roughly around Indonesia. It's the epicenter of coral reef biodiversity on Earth. More species of coral live in the Coral Triangle than anywhere else. More species of reef fish live there than anywhere else. The Coral Triangle is home to nearly half of the world's coral reefs, despite covering only a small fraction of the global ocean. The Coral Triangle is also home to many human communities that depend on reef resources for food and livelihood. The Coral Triangle faces significant threats from overfishing, destructive fishing, pollution, and climate change. The Red Sea has some of the most spectacular coral reefs in the world. Reefs here have adapted to the unique conditions of the Red Sea: high temperature, high salinity, and limited nutrient input. Red Sea corals tend to be heat adapted, tolerating higher temperatures than corals in other regions. Because of this, Red Sea reefs have been somewhat more resistant to bleaching than reefs in other regions. Scientists are studying Red Sea corals to understand what makes them heat tolerant, with the hope that these insights can help protect more vulnerable reefs elsewhere. Caribbean reefs have experienced dramatic declines in recent decades. In the 1980s, a disease wiped out most of the sea urchins in the Caribbean. With sea urchins gone, algae proliferated and smothered corals. Many Caribbean reefs that were coral-dominated in the 1970s became algae-dominated by the 1990s. This shift has been difficult to reverse. Some Caribbean reefs are showing signs of recovery, but others remain in an algae-dominated state. The Caribbean reefs demonstrate how vulnerable reefs can be to disturbance and how difficult recovery can be. Kelp forests are ecosystems found in cold water, analogous to coral reefs but built by large algae rather than corals. Kelp forests are as biodiverse as coral reefs despite existing in cold water. The two ecosystems represent different solutions to the problem of creating complex habitat structure in the ocean. Kelp forests show that reef-like ecosystems don't require corals or tropical conditions. Anywhere that has hard substrate and the right conditions, complex ecosystems can develop. The colors of reef fish serve multiple purposes. Bright colors can be warning coloration, advertising that the fish is poisonous or has spines. Bright colors can help fish recognize each other and find mates. Some fish have cryptic coloration, colors that help them blend in with their surroundings. Some fish can change color, adapting to their environment or to their emotional state. The diversity of fish colors in coral reefs creates a visual spectacle that's hard to match in any other ecosystem. Camouflage in coral reefs is sophisticated. Some fish match the color of the substrate so perfectly that they're almost invisible. Some fish have body shapes that mimic corals or other parts of the reef structure. Some fish hide in plain sight by having patterns that disrupt their outline. Camouflage effectiveness is constantly being tested as predators evolve better ways to detect camouflaged prey, and prey evolves better camouflage in response. This evolutionary arms race results in increasingly sophisticated camouflage. Mimicry happens when one species evolves to resemble another species. Some harmless fish have evolved to look like poisonous fish, gaining the protection of looking dangerous without actually being dangerous. Some fish mimic other species that eat parasites. allowing the mimic to approach prey that would normally flee. The study of mimicry in coral reefs provides insight into how natural selection works and how arms races between predators and prey drive evolution. Bioluminescence in shallow coral reefs is rare compared to the deep ocean, but it does exist. Some reef creatures produce bioluminescence, though the reasons aren't always clear. In shallow water where sunlight penetrates, bioluminescence isn't as useful for attracting prey as it is in the deep. Some organisms might use bioluminescence for communication or defense. The bioluminescence of shallow water organisms is still being studied. Transparency is a form of camouflage where organisms become invisible by making their bodies transparent. Some reef fish are nearly completely transparent. Some reef fish are transparent except for their eyes, which they hide or position in ways that minimize visibility. Transparency is energetically expensive. Maintaining a transparent body requires avoiding pigmentation, which is unusual in nature. The organisms that have evolved transparency have clearly found it advantageous enough to warrant this cost. Reef fish behavior is fascinating and complex. Fish engage in courtship displays, territorial battles, cooperative hunting, and many other behaviors. Some fish are known to use tools. Some fish recognize individual humans. Some fish change their behavior based on learning. The intelligence of some reef fish rivals that of much larger-brained animals. Behavioral studies of reef fish are revealing surprising sophistication and cognition in creatures we might otherwise assume are simple. Migration of reef fish is less dramatic than migrations of whales or birds, but it happens nonetheless. Some fish migrate daily, feeding in one location during the day and moving to a different location to sleep at night. Some fish make seasonal migrations. Some fish migrate between different reefs. These migrations are driven by food availability, reproductive timing, and other factors. Understanding migration patterns is important for reef management and conservation. Nocturnal behavior is common in reef fish. During the day, many fish hide in crevices or in deeper water. At night, they emerge to feed. This behavior allows fish to exploit food resources at night while avoiding visual predators during the day. The nighttime reef is a completely different place than the daytime reef. Different fish are active. Different behaviors are happening. Exploring reefs at night with lights reveals a world that most people never see. Sleep in fish is different from sleep in mammals and birds. Fish don't have eyelids, so they don't close their eyes to sleep. But fish do seem to enter resting states where they're less responsive to stimuli. Some fish sleep in sheltered crevices. Some fish sleep in a mucus cocoon that they secrete, an envelope that might protect them from predators or parasites. The study of sleep in fish is revealing that sleep is more universal than previously thought, present across many groups of organisms despite their different anatomy and physiology. Reproduction timing in reef fish often corresponds to lunar cycles. Many reef fish spawn during specific phases of the moon. This synchronization is thought to help coordinate reproduction across the population and might provide advantages like increased survival of larvae. The mechanism by which fish detect lunar phases isn't fully understood. It might involve light levels, tidal currents, or other environmental cues that correlate with lunar phases. Understanding reproduction timing is important for managing fish populations and ensuring adequate recruitment. Parental care in fish ranges from absent to highly devoted. Some fish spawn and immediately abandon their eggs. Other fish guard eggs intensely, keeping them in their mouth, guarding them against predators, and ensuring they're kept oxygenated. Parental care is energetically expensive, but can increase the survival of offspring. Species that invest heavily in parental care typically produce fewer offspring, but have higher survival rates for those offspring. Species that invest little in parental care produce many offspring, but have lower survival rates. Different species have evolved different strategies along this spectrum. Hermaphroditism in fish is more common than in mammals. Some fish are simultaneous hermaphrodites, having both male and female organs. Some fish are sequential hermaphrodites, starting as one sex and changing to the other during their lifetime. The environmental and behavioral triggers for sex change in fish are being studied, and the results are revealing that sex determination and sexual differentiation are more flexible than previously thought. Some fish can even change sex multiple times during their lives in response to social circumstances. The relationship between reef fish and reef structure is intimate. Many fish depend on specific types of coral or specific coral shapes for shelter. When corals die and the reef structure degrades, fish populations often decline as appropriate shelter disappears. The loss of shelter can be as important as the loss of food in explaining fish population declines. This underscores the importance of coral preservation. Protecting coral isn't just about the coral itself, but about the entire reef ecosystem that depends on coral structure. Reef resilience is the ability of a reef to recover from disturbance. Some reefs are resilient and can recover from damage. Other reefs are fragile and struggle to recover. Resilience depends on factors like biodiversity, the presence of keystone species, recruitment rates, and environmental conditions. Reefs with high biodiversity tend to be more resilient because there's functional redundancy. If one species declines, another species might be able to perform similar functions. Protecting reef resilience is important for long-term reef conservation. The concept of tipping points in reef ecosystems suggests that reefs can transition rapidly from a coral-dominated state to an algae-dominated state. Once a reef crosses a tipping point, it can be very difficult for it to return to coral dominance, even if the original stressors are removed. Preventing reefs from crossing tipping points is therefore crucial for conservation. This requires managing stressors like fishing pressure, pollution, and climate change to keep stress levels below the threshold where tipping points occur. The future of coral reefs depends on global action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit climate change. Even if emissions are reduced dramatically, ocean temperatures will continue to rise for decades due to greenhouse gases already emitted. Some level of additional coral bleaching seems inevitable. But the difference between a warming scenario of 1.5 degrees and a warming scenario of 2 degrees or more is enormous for coral reefs. Every tenth of a degree makes a difference. Limiting warming to the smallest possible amount is crucial for reef survival. Local management of reefs can help them resist and recover from global stressors like climate change. Reducing local stressors like fishing pressure, pollution, and destructive practices can make reefs more resilient. Marine protected areas where fishing is restricted have been shown to support healthier reefs that are more resistant to bleaching. Managing local stressors won't solve the problem of climate change, but it can help buy time and maximize the resilience of reefs as temperatures rise. Coral restoration efforts are underway in many locations. Scientists are growing corals in labs and outplanting them to degraded reefs. Some restoration projects have shown promise, successfully establishing new coral colonies on damaged reefs. However, coral restoration at scale, restoring degraded reefs to their former glory, is extremely challenging and expensive. Restoration is best viewed as a supplement to conservation efforts, not a replacement for them. Preventing reef damage is far easier and cheaper than restoring damaged reefs. The cultural and spiritual significance of coral reefs for human communities is profound. For many indigenous peoples, reefs are not just resources but of deep cultural and spiritual meaning. Some communities have traditions of reef stewardship dating back centuries. These traditional ecological knowledge systems often incorporate sustainable practices that have allowed reefs to thrive despite human presence. Integrating traditional knowledge with scientific knowledge is increasingly recognized as important for reef conservation. The forereef zone is the seaward slope of a reef, the area where the reef meets the open ocean. This zone experiences wave energy from open ocean swells. Corals in this zone are adapted to handle wave energy. Branching corals might be less common because branches can break in strong waves. Instead, massive rounded corals and encrusting corals that can withstand wave energy are more common. The forereef zone is often the most visually impressive part of a reef, with steep slopes covered in corals dropping down to deep water. The reef crest is the shallowest, highest energy part of a reef. It's where waves break and where water is most turbulent. Corals here must be extremely wave resistant. The coral community often consists of just a few hardy species that can withstand the intense wave energy. Algae often grows thickly here, sometimes forming algae-dominated zones called algae ridges. Despite the harsh conditions, the reef crest supports unique communities of organisms adapted to these extreme conditions. The back reef zone is the area behind the reef crest, the sheltered side. This zone experiences less wave energy and warmer water if a lagoon is present. Corals here can be more delicate and branching because they don't need to resist intense wave energy. The back reef often supports different coral species than the forereef. The back reef lagoon can be relatively protected and develop unique communities of fish and invertebrates. The water in back reef lagoons can become warm and sometimes stagnant, creating unique chemical conditions. Reef slope zones change gradually with depth. Shallow slopes from the surface down to about 30 meters support diverse coral communities with many branching corals and massive corals. Intermediate depths, from about 30 to 60 meters, often support different coral species, sometimes forming bands of different coral types visible as horizontal stripes on the slope. Deep slopes, below about 60 meters, support fewer corals and more anemones, sponges, and other organisms. The zonation patterns visible on reef slopes reflect how different organisms are adapted to different light and pressure conditions at different depths. Vertical zonation in coral reefs involves distinct communities at different depths. At the shallowest depths with intense light, fast-growing corals dominate. At intermediate depths with moderate light, different species dominate. At deep depths with minimal light, corals adapted to low light, or even a hermatypic corals without zooxanthellae, dominate. The boundaries between zones are often sharp, creating visible horizontal bands on the reef. These zones reflect the ecological optima of different species. The depth range where each species is most competitive. Horizontal zonation in coral reefs involves different communities on different parts of the reef. The windward side of a reef, facing prevailing winds and waves, has different communities than the leeward side. The exposed seaward slope has different communities than the sheltered lagoon side. These differences reflect how water movement, wave energy, and other physical factors vary across the reef. Understanding horizontal and vertical zonation is crucial for understanding reef ecology and for predicting how reefs will respond to environmental changes. Light penetration in coral reefs decreases with depth in a predictable pattern. In clear tropical water, sunlight can penetrate to 50 or 60 meters, enough light for photosynthesis to occur. But the quality of light changes with depth. Red light is absorbed first, then orange, then yellow. At depth, the water appears increasingly blue. Organisms at different depths have evolved photosynthetic pigments, optimized for the wavelengths of light available at their depth. Shallow water corals have pigments adapted to blue and red light. Deep water corals have pigments adapted to blue light. This adaptation to local light conditions is an elegant example of how evolution fine-tunes organisms to their environments. Nutrient cycling in coral reefs is surprisingly efficient given that tropical waters are often nutrient poor. Reefs exist in what are sometimes called oases in deserts, highly productive ecosystems in nutrient-poor tropical waters. The efficiency of nutrient cycling in reefs means that nutrients are recycled many times before leaving the reef system. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients are captured by organisms and held in reef biomass rather than being lost to the open ocean. The tight nutrient cycling is one of the factors that allows reefs to be so productive despite low nutrient input from the open ocean. Nitrogen fixation in coral reefs is performed by cyanobacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms that other organisms can use. Some of the most important nitrogen fixers on reefs are symbiotic cyanobacteria living inside the tissues of corals and other organisms. By hosting these nitrogen-fixing bacteria, corals are acquiring additional nitrogen that allows them to grow larger and more vigorous. The discovery that corals host nitrogen-fixing bacteria has revealed an additional dimension to coral symbiosis beyond the coral-zooxanthellae relationship. Microbial communities in coral reef sediments and in the water column are incredibly diverse and play crucial roles in nutrient cycling. Bacteria decompose dead organic matter, releasing nutrients. Bacteria oxidize methane and other reduced compounds, transforming them into oxidized forms. Archaeal communities exist in reef sediments and participate in unique metabolic pathways. Viruses infect bacteria, controlling bacterial populations and transforming organic material. The microbial world of coral reefs is complex and is still being discovered. Understanding microbial ecology is important for understanding reef functioning. Bioeroders are organisms that bore into or scrape coral skeleton. Some fish bore into coral, creating small tunnels that weaken the coral and eventually cause pieces to break off. Some other organisms bore into dead coral skeletons. This bioerosion process is important because it creates sediment. Much of the sand found on tropical beaches comes from bioerosion of coral. In a healthy reef with vigorous coral growth, bioerosion is balanced by new coral growth. In degraded reefs where coral growth is slowing, bioerosion can dominate, leading to a net loss of reef structure. Accretion is the net growth of reef structure. When coral growth exceeds bioerosion and other destructive processes, the reef is accreting, growing upward and outward. Reef accretion rates vary, typically ranging from a few millimeters to a few centimeters per year. Fast-growing reefs can accrete at rates of 20-30 millimeters per year. Slow-growing reefs might only accrete a few millimeters per year. By measuring accretion rates, scientists can assess reef health and productivity. Declining accretion rates suggest declining reef health. Larval planulae are the mobile larvae released by corals during spawning. These larvae are tiny, often less than 2 millimeters long. They drift in ocean currents, potentially traveling great distances. Larval dispersal is one of the ways that coral populations maintain genetic diversity and ensure connectivity between different reefs. Larvae that drift for long distances can colonize distant reefs, introducing new genetic material. But long-distance dispersal is risky. Most larvae will die during their drift phase and never reach suitable settlement substrate. Larval settlement is the process where a planula larva attaches to substrate and begins to develop into a coral polyp. Settlement is triggered by environmental cues that signal that a suitable location has been found. These cues might include chemical signals from coralline algae or from established coral colonies, or they might include physical signals like substrate texture. Larvae are more likely to settle near existing corals because this signals that the location can support coral. But sometimes larvae settle in areas not suitable for long-term survival, and the young coral dies shortly after settlement. Recruitment is the process where settling larvae grow into established coral colonies. Recruitment success depends on finding suitable settlement substrate and surviving long enough to grow large enough to be resistant to disturbance and predation. In healthy reefs with good recruitment, Young corals are abundant and coral populations are self-sustaining. In degraded reefs with poor recruitment, young corals are rare or absent. And coral populations are declining as older corals die and are not replaced by new recruitment. Larval genetics reveals that larvae from different reefs sometimes carry different genetic variations. Some reef fish populations in different locations have distinct genetic signatures. Some coral populations in different locations show genetic differentiation. This genetic variation reflects both historical isolation and recent gene flow between reefs. The more genetic connectivity between reefs, the better reefs can potentially help each other recover from disturbance. Conversely, if reefs become too isolated genetically, a disease or disturbance that affects one reef population might not be able to be rescued by genetic input from other reefs. Productivity in coral reefs is remarkably high compared to the nutrient-poor tropical waters that surround them. Measured in terms of grams of organic matter produced per square meter per year, coral reefs rival rainforests and other highly productive terrestrial ecosystems. This high productivity occurs despite low nutrient input because nutrients are cycled very efficiently within the reef system. Every nutrient is captured and used by reef organisms. Minimal nutrients escape. This efficiency allows tremendous productivity and biomass to accumulate on reefs. Primary production in coral reefs is performed by zooxanthellae living in coral tissue, by macroalgae growing on the reef, and by microscopic phytoplankton. Zooxanthellae are the dominant primary producers on healthy reefs, contributing more to primary production than the other sources combined. Zooxanthellae productivity depends on light availability, so primary production is highest on shallow reefs and decreases with depth. The primary production by zooxanthellae supports not just the corals but also the numerous organisms that feed on zooxanthellae or that feed on organisms that feed on zooxanthellae. Secondary production in coral reefs is the production of biomass by consumers. Fish, invertebrates, and other animals that eat the primary producers. Secondary production is lower than primary production due to energy loss at each trophic transfer. But secondary production in reefs is still very high compared to most marine ecosystems. The abundance of fish and invertebrates in coral reefs reflects the high secondary production. The abundance of fisheries based on coral reefs also reflects this high secondary production. Reefs can support commercial fish catches that rival the productivity of much larger areas of the open ocean. Trophic levels in coral reefs are similar to other ecosystems. Primary producers, herbivores, carnivores, and top carnivores. But the functional relationships can be complex. Some organisms occupy multiple trophic levels. Some fish are both herbivorous and carnivorous, feeding on different food sources depending on what's available. Some organisms feed on detritus and serve roles similar to decomposers. The structure of food webs in coral reefs reflects the diversity of feeding strategies that have evolved. Food web complexity in coral reefs is higher than in most other ecosystems. The diversity of species and the diversity of feeding strategies create complex patterns of who eats whom. Models of coral reef food webs can become quite complex, with many interconnections. This complexity has important implications for ecosystem stability. Complex food webs with many interconnections tend to be more stable than simple food webs because there are many alternative pathways for energy flow. If one species declines, other species might be able to fill similar functions. Algae-dominated reefs are reefs where algae are the dominant primary producers instead of corals. In these reefs, algae cover much of the available space, and coral cover is low. Algae-dominated reefs have different fish communities than coral-dominated reefs. They have fewer fish species overall and fewer herbivorous fish. The shift from coral-dominated to algae-dominated often represents reef degradation. However, in some cases, Algae-dominated states might represent natural variations that occur periodically as part of reef dynamics. Shifts from coral dominance to algae dominance can happen suddenly when a disturbance removes corals faster than they can recover. A severe storm might physically damage coral. Bleaching might kill coral. Disease might kill coral. When corals are killed, the space opens up for algae to colonize. If the algae growth is vigorous, it might prevent new corals from establishing by shading them and smothering them. The reef can then transition into an algae-dominated state where coral recovery becomes difficult. Once in an algae-dominated state, returning to coral dominance requires either removal of algae or changes in conditions that allow corals to outcompete algae. Reversals from algae dominance back to coral dominance have been observed, but are relatively rare without intervention. These reversals require conditions that favor coral growth over algae growth. This might involve removing herbivorous fish so that they can better control algae, or improving water quality so corals are less stressed. Some conservation efforts focus on facilitating reversals from algae dominated to coral-dominated states through active management. Reef migration refers to the potential for reefs to migrate to deeper or different locations as environmental conditions change. If water temperature rises and becomes unsuitable for corals at their current depth, corals might be able to establish at greater depth where temperature is lower. Some species might move poleward as tropical temperatures extend toward the poles. However, reef migration is constrained by the availability of suitable substrate and by the depth-dependent light availability that zooxanthellae need. Massive poleward shifts of reef ecosystems are probably not feasible on any reasonable timescale. Reef extinction risk is the possibility that some coral species or even entire reefs might go extinct. Some coral species have limited ranges and might be vulnerable if their environment changes beyond their tolerance. Reefs in isolated locations might be at higher extinction risk than reefs connected to many other reefs via larval dispersal. Climate change, ocean acidification, and other anthropogenic impacts are increasing extinction risk for some species and some reefs. The potential loss of coral reefs would represent an enormous loss of biodiversity and an enormous change to ocean ecosystems. Parasitism in reef fish involves fish parasites that live on or inside other fish. Some parasites are external, living on the fish's skin or gills. Some parasites are internal, living in the fish's body cavity or organs. Fish parasites can reduce their host's growth, reproduction, and survival. The abundance of parasites in reef fish is controlled by cleaning fish that pick parasites off their hosts. When cleaning fish populations decline due to overfishing or other causes, parasite loads on other fish can increase significantly. Diseases in reef fish are caused by bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other pathogens. Some diseases cause visible symptoms like lesions or discoloration. Other diseases cause subtle physiological effects that might not be visible but still affect the fish's health. Disease outbreaks in reef fish populations can occur when conditions are favorable for disease transmission. Stress from temperature changes, poor water quality, or other factors can increase susceptibility to disease. Understanding disease in reef fish is important because disease can sometimes be a significant source of fish mortality. Parasites in reef corals also exist, though they're less obvious than parasites in fish. Some invertebrates feed on coral polyps. Some parasites infect the zooxanthellae or interfere with the coral-zooxanthellae relationship. The impacts of coral parasites on coral health are not fully understood but are likely significant in some situations. Reef architecture refers to the physical structure of the reef created by coral skeleton and other structural organisms. Reefs with complex architecture have many crevices, caves, and branching structures that provide habitat for fish and invertebrates. Simple architecture with just a few mound corals provides fewer habitat niches. The loss of structural complexity as reefs degrade reduces habitat availability and causes fish populations to decline even if food remains abundant. The importance of reef architecture for supporting reef fish populations is increasingly recognized as important for reef conservation. Reef frameworks built up over millions of years become part of the geological record. Ancient reefs are now found on land, preserved in limestone and other sedimentary rock. These fossil reefs provide information about past climates, past organisms, and past sea levels. Some of the oldest known reefs are about 3.5 billion years old. The continuity of reef ecosystems over billions of years, despite mass extinctions and climate fluctuations, demonstrates the resilience and importance of reef ecosystems. Cryopreservation is a technique where genetic material from coral is frozen and stored for potential future use in restoration or research. Some coral banking initiatives are collecting and preserving genetic material from diverse coral populations to ensure that genetic diversity is maintained even if some populations are lost. The idea is that if a coral population goes extinct, the frozen genetic material could potentially be used to restore the population. However, the technology to use frozen genetic material to create live corals from frozen samples is not yet well developed. Coral bleaching prediction models are being developed to forecast where and when bleaching might occur. These models use water temperature projections and other environmental data to predict bleaching risk. Bleaching forecasts are being used to help manage reefs, for example, by potentially restricting fishing or other stressors in areas predicted to experience bleaching, with the idea that healthier reefs might be more resistant to bleaching. The accuracy of bleaching predictions is improving as models become more sophisticated. The economic value of coral reefs is enormous. Fishing based on coral reefs provides income and food for millions of people. Tourism based on coral reefs generates billions of dollars in revenue annually. Coastal protection from reefs reduces damage from storms and erosion. Pharmaceutical compounds derived from coral reef organisms have proven useful in medicine. The economic value of the ecosystem services provided by coral reefs is estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Despite this enormous economic value, reefs continue to be exploited and damaged. The loss of ecosystem services from degraded reefs is a significant economic consequence. Fisheries decline as fish populations crash. Tourism revenue declines as reefs become less beautiful and less diverse. Coastal communities lose protection from storms and waves. The economic impacts of reef degradation often fall most heavily on the poorest communities, those that depend most directly on reefs for their survival. The inequality in how reef degradation affects different human communities is an important justice issue. Global reef monitoring programs track the health of reefs worldwide. Systematic surveys of reef fish populations, coral cover, and other indicators provide data on reef trends. These monitoring programs have documented the global decline in reef health over the past few decades. They've also identified reefs that are relatively healthy and reefs that are severely degraded. The monitoring data is crucial for understanding the magnitude of the reef crisis and for targeting conservation efforts. Reef management varies worldwide. Some reefs are strictly protected as marine reserves where no extraction is allowed. Some reefs are managed to allow sustainable fishing. Some reefs receive minimal management. The effectiveness of different management approaches is being evaluated. Evidence suggests that well-managed marine reserves that restrict fishing have healthier reefs than areas with no management or with inadequate enforcement. However, managing reefs for local benefits alone is insufficient if global climate change is altering reef conditions. The future of coral reefs depends on both global and local action. Global action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit climate change is essential. Without reducing emissions, ocean temperatures will continue to rise, and coral bleaching will continue to be a major stress on reefs. Local action to reduce fishing pressure, pollution, and destructive practices is also essential. Healthy, well-managed reefs are more resilient to bleaching and other stressors. The combination of global mitigation and local adaptation offers the best hope for reef survival. However, even with aggressive action on both fronts, the reefs of the future will likely be different from today's reefs. Some coral species might not survive even with aggressive climate action. Some reefs might transition to different stable states. The concept of shifting baselines is relevant here. As reefs degrade, what people consider normal shifts to a more degraded state, and people might not realize how much has been lost. Preventing further loss and recovering what has been lost should be priorities for reef conservation. The beauty of coral reefs is not just aesthetic but also functional. The bright colors of fish and corals might serve purposes beyond beauty. Colors might be important for species recognition, for finding mates, for territorial signaling. The intricate structures of branching corals might be optimized for capturing light or for resisting waves. What we perceive as beauty often reflects functional optimization evolved over millions of years. The beauty of reefs is therefore both a source of inspiration and a reminder of the remarkable creativity of evolutionary processes. The wonder of coral reefs is that such an intricate, diverse, complex ecosystem can develop in tropical waters despite low nutrient input. The fact that millions of species of fish and invertebrates live together in a small area, competing and cooperating, predating and being preyed upon, is remarkable. The fact that this complexity is built on the foundation of a symbiosis between coral and algae is remarkable. The coral reef is a testament to what life can accomplish given sufficient time and adequate conditions. The abundance of life in coral reefs stands in contrast to the poverty of life in the surrounding tropical ocean. Just beyond the reef, the water is relatively empty with relatively few fish and organisms. The reef is an oasis. Understanding why the reef is so much more abundant than the surrounding ocean provides insight into the principles of ecology and the factors that determine ecosystem productivity. The reef shows that the limiting factor for productivity in tropical oceans is nutrient availability. Wherever nutrients accumulate, productivity increases dramatically. The interconnectedness of reef organisms means that the loss of one species can have cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. The loss of herbivorous fish allows algae to increase, which can smother coral. The loss of coral removes habitat for fish. The loss of fish can affect invertebrate communities and even microbial communities. The tight interdependence of reef organisms means that reefs are vulnerable to disruption. Protecting individual species is important, but protecting ecosystem function and the interconnections between species is equally important. The resilience of some reefs, despite many decades of human pressure, is remarkable. Some reefs that have suffered bleaching have recovered. Some overfished reefs have shown signs of recovery when fishing pressure was reduced. Reefs have shown an ability to bounce back from disturbance, at least if disturbance is not too frequent or too severe. This resilience offers hope that with adequate protection and management, reefs can persist and potentially recover from the damage they've suffered. Endosymbiosis is the evolutionary process by which one organism takes another organism inside its body, and the two become so interdependent that they function as a single organism. The coral zooxanthellae relationship is a form of endosymbiosis. The coral provides a protected environment for the algae, and the algae provides energy through photosynthesis. This relationship is thought to have originated millions of years ago when a zooxanthellae cell was engulfed by a coral cell, and instead of being digested, it was retained and integrated. Since then, The relationship has evolved to become so intimate that neither partner can survive without the other in most cases. Horizontal gene transfer is the process where organisms acquire genes from other organisms through mechanisms other than sexual reproduction. Genetic material can move between corals and zooxanthellae, between corals and bacteria, between different bacteria species. Horizontal gene transfer is thought to be particularly important in microbial communities where different microorganisms live in close proximity. The discovery that horizontal gene transfer is common has expanded our understanding of how evolution works. Evolution is not just about genetic material being passed from parents to offspring, but also about genetic material moving laterally between species. Evolution of reef corals over millions of years has produced the diversity of coral species we see today. Different coral species are adapted to different depths, different light levels, different wave energy levels, and different food sources. The evolution of different coral morphologies, branching, massive, encrusting, plate-like, reflects adaptation to different environmental conditions. The evolution of chemical defenses against predators and pathogens has made some corals better defended than others. Evolution has optimized nearly every aspect of coral biology for life on the reef. Co-evolution is the process where two species evolve in response to each other. Reef fish and reef corals have co-evolved. Fish that feed on corals have evolved ways to extract energy from coral tissue, and corals have evolved defenses against these fish. Fish that clean parasites from coral have evolved to manipulate coral polyps to extract parasites more effectively, and corals have evolved to tolerate or even encourage this behavior. Cleaning fish and their fish clients have co-evolved mutually beneficial behaviors. Co-evolution in coral reefs is ongoing and constantly refining the interactions between species. Adaptive radiation is the evolutionary process where one ancestral species diversifies into many different species, each adapted to different niches. Reef fish represent an example of adaptive radiation. An ancestral fish species colonized a reef, and over millions of years, it diversified into hundreds of species, each exploiting different food sources and different habitats. Different reef locations have had independent adaptive radiations, producing different fish communities despite similar reef conditions. The diversity of reef fish is a testimony to the power of adaptive radiation and to the diversity of niches available on reefs. Convergent evolution is the process where different species independently evolve similar solutions to similar problems. On reefs, many different fish species have evolved similar body shapes, similar colors, and similar behaviors despite having distant common ancestors. The similar body shapes reflect adaptation to similar hydrodynamic and ecological conditions. The similar colors might reflect selection for crypsis or aposematism or species recognition. Convergent evolution demonstrates that certain solutions to ecological challenges are particularly effective. Speciation on reefs might happen through different mechanisms. Allopatric speciation occurs when populations are geographically isolated and diverge into separate species. Corals on different reefs might be isolated enough that populations diverge. Sympatric speciation occurs when new species evolve in the absence of geographic isolation. Some reef fish might undergo sympatric speciation by specializing on different food sources or microhabitats on the same reef. The mechanisms of speciation are still being studied and debated, but the importance of speciation for creating reef diversity is clear. The fossil record of reefs extends back billions of years. The oldest known reefs are about 3-5 billion years old, formed by cyanobacteria and other microorganisms. Later in Earth's history, sponges formed reefs. Rudest clams and other mollusks formed reefs. Coral reefs as we know them today developed about 50 million years ago after the evolution of zooxanthellae corals. The fossil record shows that reefs have existed through multiple mass extinction events. though the specific species composing reefs changed each time. The persistence of reef ecosystems through billions of years of Earth history demonstrates their fundamental importance to ocean ecosystems. Cretaceous period reefs were dominated by different organisms than modern reefs. Rudist clams, large clams that lived in colonies and filled a role similar to modern corals, were the dominant reef builders. These reefs were destroyed at the end of the Cretaceous period during the mass extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. After this extinction, reef ecosystems recovered and re-established themselves. Modern coral reefs eventually became the dominant reef type, and they've persisted for tens of millions of years since then. The Great Barrier Reef as it exists today is less than 9,000 years old. Following the end of the last ice age and the rising of sea level, coral larvae colonized the continental shelf off Australia. Over thousands of years, coral growth built up the enormous structure we know today. The age of 9,000 years might seem ancient, but it's young in geological time. The current reef structure is a recent creation built on foundations of older reefs and deposits. Caribbean reefs have experienced dramatic changes in the past few centuries. When Europeans arrived in the Caribbean in the 1500s, reefs were dominated by large corals and were rich with fish. By the 1800s, overfishing had reduced fish populations significantly. In the 1980s, disease killed most of the sea urchins, tipping many reefs toward algae dominance. In the 2000s and 2010s, climate change-driven bleaching events killed many corals. The trajectory of Caribbean reefs over the past few centuries represents a transformation from coral-dominated and fish-rich to algae-dominated and fish-poor. Indo-Pacific reefs have experienced similar pressures. Overfishing has depleted fish populations. Destructive fishing practices have damaged reef structure. Coral disease has increased. Bleaching events have become more frequent and more severe. However, some Indo-Pacific reefs have fared better than Caribbean reefs, particularly in remote locations with less human pressure. The variation in reef conditions worldwide suggests that local management efforts can make a difference, even as global climate change poses ongoing stresses. Indigenous peoples have lived on coasts with coral reefs for thousands of years. The cultures of Pacific Islanders, Caribbean peoples, and other indigenous groups developed in close relationship with reef ecosystems. These peoples developed sophisticated knowledge of reef ecology, reef fish behavior, and sustainable reef management. Traditional practices often incorporated conservation principles, such as seasonal closures on fishing or restricting fishing on certain reef areas. The sustainability of some traditional reef management practices is remarkable given that they were developed through empirical observation over centuries. Before the development of scientific ecology, Polynesian navigation using ocean swells and stars allowed voyagers to cross vast distances of open ocean and to locate small islands. These navigators had intimate knowledge of ocean conditions and reef ecosystems. Their ability to travel across the Pacific and establish human communities on distant islands was dependent on their understanding of reefs and reef ecosystems. The decline of these traditional navigation practices following European colonization represented a loss of cultural knowledge and a disconnection between humans and reef ecosystems. The aquarium trade has driven collection of coral reef fish worldwide. Millions of fish are collected annually from reefs and sold for home aquariums. While captive breeding of some aquarium fish is now common, many species are still wild caught. Overfishing for the aquarium trade has depleted populations of some popular fish species in some locations. Practices like cyanide fishing used to capture aquarium fish alive have caused damage to reefs. The aquarium trade represents both a positive force, encouraging public interest in reefs, and a negative force, leading to overharvesting of some species. The ornamental coral trade has driven collection of corals for the aquarium hobby and for jewelry. Illegal collection of corals has occurred in some locations. While the volume of coral collection is typically smaller than fish collection, the impacts can be significant, particularly when collection targets rare species or when collection uses destructive methods. Most countries now have regulations restricting coral collection, but enforcement varies. Tourism based on coral reefs generates enormous economic value. Millions of tourists visit coral reefs annually, spending billions of dollars. Tourism provides income for local communities and incentives for reef protection. Healthy reefs attract more tourists and generate more revenue than degraded reefs. Tourism can be sustainable when properly managed. Tourists can observe reefs without causing damage. However, uncontrolled tourism can cause damage. Boat anchors can break coral. Careless wading can trample coral. Sunscreen chemicals can harm zooxanthellae. Well-managed tourism coexists with reef health, but poorly managed tourism can contribute to reef degradation. Reef restoration tourism has emerged as a form of ecotourism. Tourists pay to participate in coral restoration activities, such as growing coral fragments or outplanting corals to degraded reefs. This form of tourism raises awareness about reef conservation while potentially contributing to restoration efforts. However, the scale of restoration achieved through tourism-based restoration is small relative to the scale of reef degradation. Still, the awareness raising and the participation of tourists in conservation can have value beyond the direct restoration accomplished. Ocean acidification occurs when carbon dioxide from the atmosphere dissolves in seawater, forming carbonic acid and lowering pH. Ocean acidification is already happening. The pH of seawater has decreased by about 0.1 units since the Industrial Revolution. This might seem like a small change, but it represents a 30% increase in acidity. Ocean acidification is expected to continue as carbon dioxide continues to accumulate in the atmosphere. This lowering of pH affects creatures that build shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate, including corals. As the ocean becomes more acidic, it becomes harder for corals and other shell-building organisms to build and maintain their skeletons. Hypercalcification is the process where corals build their skeletons faster in response to ocean acidification. Some corals have been observed to increase their calcification rates when exposed to more acidic water, possibly as a compensatory mechanism to maintain skeleton building rates despite more difficult conditions. However, hypercalcification is energetically expensive, requiring the coral to allocate more energy to skeleton building and less to growth and reproduction. Eventually, if acidification becomes too severe, even hypercalcification won't be enough to maintain skeleton building. Dissolved oxygen is crucial for most reef fish and invertebrates. As ocean temperatures rise and as nutrient pollution increases eutrophication, some coastal reefs are experiencing declining oxygen levels. Low oxygen zones can create dead zones where most aerobic organisms can't survive. Climate change is expanding oxygen minimum zones in many ocean regions. Some coral reef ecosystems are experiencing impacts from declining oxygen levels, with unknown consequences for reef ecology. Sedimentation from erosion of land and from river runoff can bury coral reefs. Sediment reduces light penetration, stressing corals that depend on zooxanthellae. Sediment can also smother coral polyps, preventing them from feeding. Areas around major rivers often have degraded reefs because of high sediment input. Deforestation and other land use changes increase erosion, increasing sediment runoff, which increases stress on reefs. Runoff from agricultural land carries nutrients that fuel algae blooms and sediment that smothers coral. Petroleum pollution affects reefs when oil or oil products enter the reef environment. An oil spill can kill corals and fish and leave persistent effects for years. Even small amounts of petroleum in the water can stress corals. The drilling for oil and gas in offshore locations near reefs poses risks that an accident could spill oil on reefs. Some reefs have persistent impacts from historical oil spills. Agricultural runoff brings nutrients and pesticides to reefs. Excess nutrients trigger algae blooms that can smother coral. Pesticides can be toxic to coral and reef organisms. Areas with intense agricultural activity nearby often have degraded reefs due to agricultural runoff. Changing agricultural practices to reduce runoff could benefit reefs, but the economic incentives for farmers to invest in runoff reduction are often inadequate. Crown of thorns sea stars are large, spiny sea stars that feed on coral polyps. Normally, crown of thorns are kept in check by predators, particularly the giant triton snail and other predators. But when predators are overfished and depleted, crown of thorns populations can explode. Population outbreaks of crown of thorns can cause massive coral mortality. Several outbreaks of crown of thorns have occurred on the Great Barrier Reef and other reefs. The outbreaks might represent natural cycles or might be driven by human-caused changes to reef ecosystems. Controlling crown of thorns outbreaks by culling is controversial. It might help in the short term, but it doesn't address the underlying causes of the outbreaks. Corallivorous fish that feed on coral polyps are normally present in low numbers and cause minimal damage. But when corallivorous fish populations increase due to a lack of predators or other causes, they can damage coral. Similarly, when overfishing removes competitors for food sources, corallivorous species might increase. Understanding the factors that control corallivorous fish populations is important for preventing them from becoming a significant reef threat. Competitive exclusion occurs when one species outcompetes another for resources, driving the second species to extinction or exclusion from the area. On reefs, when conditions favor algae over corals. For instance, when herbivorous fish are removed and algae can grow unopposed, algae can competitively exclude corals. The shift is often difficult to reverse because even if herbivorous fish are restored, the established algae might prevent new corals from establishing. Preventing competitive exclusion is often easier than reversing it. Synergistic effects happen when multiple stressors have combined effects greater than the sum of their individual effects. A coral experiencing heat stress and also exposed to pollution might be more vulnerable to disease than either stressor alone. Multiple stressors can interact in complex ways, creating cumulative impacts greater than expected. The presence of multiple stressors on reefs worldwide makes coral survival increasingly difficult. Addressing single stressors in isolation might be insufficient. Managing multiple stressors simultaneously is necessary for reef protection. Tipping points occur when reefs cross thresholds and transition to alternative stable states. A reef might transition from coral-dominated to algae-dominated if enough corals die. Once in the algae-dominated state, the reef might remain there even if the original stressor is removed, because algae prevent coral recovery. Preventing reefs from crossing tipping points is important for reef conservation. This requires maintaining reef resilience and avoiding conditions that push reefs to the edge of stability. Alternative stable states in reefs reflect the possibility that reefs can exist in different configurations depending on conditions and history. The same reef location could potentially support either a coral-dominated state or an algae-dominated state, depending on fish populations, herbivory rates, nutrient levels, and other factors. The existence of alternative stable states has implications for reef management and restoration. Once a reef has shifted to an alternative stable state, shifting it back might require active intervention. The psychological impacts of reef degradation on people who live near reefs or who value reefs are significant. Witnessing the decline of a reef one grew up visiting can be emotionally and psychologically painful. This phenomenon, called solastalgia, involves emotional distress from environmental degradation in one's home environment. Climate change and reef degradation contribute to solastalgia for many people. The psychological dimensions of environmental change, including reef degradation, are increasingly recognized as important. Environmental justice issues arise from the unequal distribution of reef degradation impacts. The richest people who consume reef resources benefit from reefs without bearing the costs of degradation. Poor people who depend on reefs for survival bear disproportionate costs of reef degradation. Indigenous communities that have sustainably managed reefs for centuries are often excluded from decision-making about reef management, while their interests are negatively affected by decisions made by others. Ensuring just and equitable reef management requires addressing these justice issues. Behavioral plasticity in reef fish allows them to adjust their behavior in response to changing conditions. When reefs are overfished, the remaining fish often become more aggressive and more territorial because competition for resources intensifies. When water conditions change, fish might adjust their feeding behavior or their movement patterns. The ability of fish to adjust their behavior helps them persist in changing environments, but has limits. If changes are too rapid or too severe, behavioral plasticity might be insufficient. Learning in reef fish allows individuals to improve their performance through experience. Fish can learn the locations of food sources, predators, safe refuges, and mates. Fish can learn which other fish are aggressive and which are not. Fish can learn complex spatial layouts of the reef. This learning capacity means that individual fish's experience matters. Loss of experienced individuals during a disturbance event means loss of learned knowledge. Rebuilding learning in fish populations after major disturbance can take time. The regeneration capacity of reef organisms varies. Some corals can regenerate from fragments. A broken piece of coral might survive and grow into a new colony. Some fish can regenerate lost fins or damaged tissue. Some sea stars can regenerate lost arms. This regeneration capacity represents a source of resilience. Organisms can survive injuries and damage. However, regeneration takes energy and time, and repeated injuries might overwhelm an organism's regeneration capacity. Settlement availability refers to the availability of suitable substrate for larvae to settle and grow. On healthy reefs with established coral and reef structure, settlement substrate is abundant. As reefs degrade and structure is lost, settlement substrate becomes scarce and larval recruitment declines. Artificially creating settlement substrate through restoration efforts, placing coral fragments or rock structures on degraded reefs, can provide substrate for larvae and facilitate reef recovery. Biodiversity hotspots in the ocean include coral reefs and kelp forests and a few other locations. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean, but host about 25% of marine species. This remarkable diversity in a small area reflects the complexity of reef ecosystems and the diverse niches available. Protecting biodiversity hotspots provides large returns in terms of species protection for the effort and resources invested. Coral reefs are therefore conservation priorities. Endemism in coral reef regions refers to species found nowhere else on Earth. Some reef regions have high endemism, with many species found only in that location. These regions are particularly valuable for conservation because their species can't be found elsewhere. The loss of endemic species means the permanent loss of that species worldwide. Protecting reefs with high endemism is therefore a conservation priority. The concept of reef health involves multiple indicators including coral cover, fish diversity, macroalgae cover, and functional diversity. A healthy reef has high coral cover, high fish diversity, low macroalgae cover, and good representation of different functional groups including herbivores, predators, and other functional categories. Not all reefs can or should aim for the same target state. Reefs in different locations with different conditions might have different optimum states. However, the general principle that healthy reefs should have these characteristics is broadly accepted. The role of hope in reef conservation is important. Despair about the severity of reef degradation can lead to apathy and inaction. But evidence that some reefs have recovered from disturbance, that some management efforts have been successful, and that humans have the capacity to make better choices provides hope. This hope is justified because reefs are resilient if given a chance. Maintaining hope while acknowledging the severity of the situation is important for motivating conservation action. The beauty and wonder of coral reefs continues to inspire people to care about reef conservation even as reefs face threats. The majesty of a healthy reef, the incredible diversity of creatures, the intricate relationships between species, and the perfection of adaptation and evolution visible on every reef continues to inspire awe. This awe and beauty inspire people to protect reefs. The continued existence of reefs provides hope that humans can learn to coexist with nature in sustainable ways. Marine protected areas are regions where human activities are restricted to protect ecosystems. Fishing might be prohibited or limited. Other extractive activities might be restricted. Some marine protected areas allow tourism, while others restrict it. Marine protected areas have been established to protect coral reefs in many locations worldwide. Well-managed marine protected areas with strong enforcement have been shown to support healthier reefs than unprotected areas. Fish populations in marine protected areas can recover from overfishing if protection is maintained long-term. The establishment and maintenance of marine protected areas is a key conservation tool for reef protection. No-take zones are marine protected areas where no extraction is allowed. No fishing, no collection of any organisms. These zones provide strict protection and have been shown to be particularly effective at recovering fish populations and maintaining reef health. However, enforcement of no-take zones is challenging and expensive. Additionally, some local communities oppose no-take zones because they restrict their access to reef resources. Balancing conservation goals with the needs and rights of local communities is an ongoing challenge. Community-based management involves local communities in decisions about reef management. In some locations, traditional coastal communities maintain customary management systems for reefs based on generations of experience. Supporting and empowering these communities to manage their reefs according to their traditions has been effective in some locations. Respecting indigenous knowledge and supporting community-based management represents a shift away from top-down management imposed by outside authorities. Gear restrictions limit the types of fishing gear allowed. Banning destructive gear like dynamite and cyanide is important. Restricting fishing methods to less selective methods that don't damage reef structure or catch non-target species helps reduce fishing impacts. Some gear, like spearfishing, allows fishers to selectively target specific fish, reducing bycatch. Different fishing methods have different impacts on reefs, and managing gear types is one way to reduce fishing impacts. Catch limits restrict the total amount of fish that can be caught in an area. Setting catch limits based on scientific assessment of fish populations can allow sustainable fishing at levels that don't cause population declines. However, enforcing catch limits requires monitoring fishing effort and catches, which is resource-intensive. In many developing nations with limited resources for enforcement, catch limits are set but not effectively enforced, leading to continued overfishing. Seasonal closures restrict fishing during specific times of year. Seasonal closures can protect fish during spawning seasons, allowing reproduction to occur without fishing pressure. They can also protect reefs during vulnerable times. For instance, closing fishing during heat waves, when corals are already stressed by temperature, might prevent additional stress from fishing activity. Seasonal closures allow limited use of reefs while providing periodic protection. Payment for ecosystem services is an approach where people are compensated for protecting ecosystems. For instance, a country might receive funding in exchange for protecting its coral reefs. This funding can support conservation efforts, support local communities dependent on reef resources, and incentivize reef protection. Payment for ecosystem services approaches have shown promise, but also face challenges. There's a risk that protection is only maintained as long as payments continue. Carbon credits from reef protection involve the principle that healthy reefs sequester carbon and therefore help mitigate climate change. Protecting reefs could generate carbon credits that could be sold to fund conservation. However, the carbon sequestration benefits of reefs are complex and not yet fully quantified. The development of accurate carbon credit systems for reef protection remains incomplete. If properly developed, carbon credits could provide financial incentives for reef protection. Green bonds are financial instruments where money is raised for environmental projects. Some green bonds have been used to fund reef restoration and reef protection projects. Green bonds provide a way for investors to contribute to environmental conservation while earning financial returns. The scale of green bond funding for reefs is currently small but could potentially grow. Restoration of degraded reefs involves active interventions to promote coral recovery. Restoring corals involves growing coral fragments in nurseries and outplanting them to degraded reefs. Restoring reef structure involves placing materials on degraded reefs to create substrate for coral larvae to settle. Creating settlement substrate involves placing materials and structures that encourage larval settlement. These restoration efforts show promise, but are resource-intensive and are currently limited to small areas. Restoration at the scale needed to restore all degraded reefs would be enormously expensive and challenging. Assisted evolution involves efforts to identify or create more heat-tolerant corals that might be better adapted to future warmer conditions. One approach involves finding coral populations or individual corals that are naturally more heat-tolerant and selectively breeding them, or using their genetic material to create more resilient coral populations. Another approach involves genetic engineering to introduce heat tolerance traits from other organisms into corals. Assisted evolution is controversial. Some argue it's necessary given the severity of climate change, while others worry about unintended consequences of genetic modification. Coral banking involves collecting and preserving genetic material from coral populations to maintain genetic diversity and to provide material for potential future restoration. Some coral genetic material has been cryopreserved, frozen for long-term storage. In theory, this preserved genetic material could be used to restore coral populations if they're lost. However, the technology to grow corals from preserved genetic material is not yet well developed, so the practical utility of coral banking remains unclear. Aquaculture of reef fish might provide an alternative to wild capture. If reef fish can be raised in captivity, the pressure to catch wild fish might be reduced. Some reef fish species are now being raised in captivity successfully. However, aquaculture of reef fish faces challenges. Some species don't breed in captivity. Some are difficult to rear to market size, and escaped fish could potentially negatively affect wild populations. Developing sustainable aquaculture for reef fish could reduce pressure on wild populations, but requires substantial development. Sustainable fishing practices that take reef ecology into account can allow continued fishing while maintaining reef health. Practices like selective fishing that targets only abundant species, fishing in ways that minimize bycatch, avoiding seasonal closures, and maintaining adequate populations of herbivorous fish can make fishing more sustainable. However, implementing sustainable fishing requires both knowledge of reef ecology and willingness of fishers to follow conservation practices, even when doing so might reduce their short-term catches. Monitoring fishing effort and catch is important for assessing fishing impacts and detecting overfishing. In many developing nations, fishing is not well monitored, making it impossible to assess whether fishing is sustainable or not. Improving monitoring requires resources and international cooperation. Satellite monitoring of fishing vessels and genetic monitoring of caught fish are emerging technologies that could improve fishing monitoring. Education about reefs is important for building support for reef conservation. Many people don't understand the importance of reefs or the threats they face. Education in schools, through media, and through other channels can increase awareness and understanding. An informed public is more likely to support conservation policies. Education that focuses on wonder and beauty, as well as science and conservation challenges, is likely most effective at motivating action. Ocean literacy refers to understanding of ocean ecosystems and how humans interact with the ocean. Improving ocean literacy globally could increase support for ocean conservation, including reef conservation. However, ocean literacy is still limited in many regions. Improving ocean education is a long-term strategy that might increase support for conservation policies over time. Renewable energy development in some locations involves offshore renewable installations near coral reefs. While renewable energy is important for addressing climate change, the construction and operation of renewable infrastructure can impact reefs. Careful planning and impact mitigation can reduce negative impacts. The trade-off between climate mitigation through renewable energy and local reef impacts is complex. Coastal development pressure affects reefs near populated areas. Pollution from cities, physical disruption from development, and light pollution all impact reefs near developed coastlines. Limiting coastal development and improving management of pollution from developed areas can reduce impacts on nearby reefs. However, the economic incentives for coastal development are powerful, and resisting development is challenging. Synergies between reef conservation and climate change mitigation exist. Protecting mangrove forests and seagrass beds alongside reef protection can create more resilient coastal ecosystems and provide additional carbon sequestration. Reducing fishing pressure on reefs might allow recovery of fish populations that eat sea urchins, which would help control sea urchins and prevent overgrazing of algae, which would favor corals. Multiple conservation actions together can have greater impacts than single actions in isolation. Ecosystem-based management involves managing ecosystems as functional wholes rather than managing individual resources in isolation. An ecosystem-based approach to reef management would consider how fish, corals, invertebrates, and other organisms interact and would aim to maintain ecosystem function. Ecosystem-based management is increasingly recognized as superior to single species or single resource management. Adaptive management involves adjusting management strategies based on results. If a reef management strategy is not producing desired results, the strategy can be adjusted based on what's learned. Adaptive management requires ongoing monitoring and willingness to change approaches. It's a learning approach that recognizes that our understanding of ecosystems is incomplete and that strategies might need adjustment as we learn more. The role of social sciences in reef conservation is increasingly recognized. Understanding why people make decisions that harm reefs, understanding incentives and disincentives for conservation behavior, understanding cultural values related to reefs. All of these social science questions are important for developing effective conservation strategies. Conservation that ignores social, economic, and cultural factors is likely to fail. Conservation that integrates social and natural sciences has a better chance of success. Economic incentives can be aligned with conservation. If fish farming becomes profitable and can supply local fish demand, pressure on wild fish populations might decrease. If tourism based on reef protection becomes more profitable than fishing, locals might support reef protection. If carbon credits from reef protection become profitable, Protection might be incentivized. Creating economic incentives for conservation is one approach to motivating conservation behavior. Political will for conservation is essential. Without political support from governments and from local leaders, conservation efforts are difficult to implement. Building political will requires education, demonstration of benefits, addressing concerns about costs, and sometimes engaging in political advocacy. The development of political will for reef conservation is ongoing and uneven across regions. The future of coral reefs in a warming world is concerning but not hopeless. If greenhouse gas emissions are reduced dramatically and rapidly, temperature increases can be limited to about 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. At this level of warming, many corals will survive, though changes will occur. Corals will shift toward heat-tolerant species or genotypes. Reefs will transform rather than disappear entirely. However, if warming continues unabated, reaching 3 or more degrees Celsius, the outlook for coral reefs becomes much darker. Catastrophic loss of reefs seems likely at warming levels of 3 degrees or more. The tipping points for coral reef ecosystems might be around 1.5 to 2 degrees of warming. At these levels, mass bleaching events could become annual or nearly annual occurrences. Corals might not have time to recover between bleaching events. Most reefs might be lost. However, the exact tipping points are uncertain and probably vary among different reefs and different regions. The potential for surprises and for non-linear responses is real. The role of hope in reef futures is important. Despair leads to inaction. But evidence that humans can solve problems, that we've solved environmental problems before, that reefs have survived previous crises, provides hope. This hope should be tempered with urgency. The window for preventing the worst outcomes is closing. Combining hope with urgency, optimism with realism, is the balance needed for effective conservation action. The perspective that coral reefs provide is humbling. Reefs have existed for tens of millions of years, through multiple climate changes and mass extinction events. Humans have existed for less than 1 million years. The human-caused changes to reefs are recent and rapid compared to the deep history of Earth. Yet in just a few decades of industrial activity, humans have caused more damage to reefs than occurred in previous millennia. This perspective is both sobering and clarifying. It shows the power of human activity and the importance of human responsibility. The interconnectedness of reefs with human communities is profound. Millions of people depend on reef fish for protein. Hundreds of millions depend on reefs for coastal protection. Reef-based tourism supports communities worldwide. Pharmaceutical compounds from reef organisms have saved lives. Human health, human well-being, and human prosperity are tied to reef health. Protecting reefs is not just an environmental issue, it's a human issue. The beauty of reefs continues to inspire despite threats. A healthy coral reef remains one of the most spectacular ecosystems on Earth. The colors, the diversity, the complexity, the density of life, all are remarkable. This beauty has inspired artists, scientists, and ordinary people to care about reefs and to work toward protecting them. The beauty of reefs provides emotional and spiritual sustenance to people. Preserving that beauty is important beyond the scientific and economic reasons for reef protection. The wonder of reefs lies in the millions of ways that evolution has solved the problem of living in the reef environment. Each species has found a way to exploit a niche, to feed on available resources, to reproduce, to survive. The coral is remarkable in its symbiosis with zooxanthellae. The fish are remarkable in their colors and behaviors. The invertebrates are remarkable in their diversity and specialization. Looking at a reef is like looking at an exhibition of evolutionary solutions. A testament to the creativity of evolution and the diversity of life. The quiet of a coral reef at night is peaceful. As dusk falls, daytime fish retreat to shelter and nighttime fish emerge. The reef becomes quieter, though never completely silent. There are still sounds of fish feeding, of organisms moving through the water and across the reef. The night reef is a different world than the day reef. Humans rarely experience the night reef, but those who do often find it peaceful and restorative. The permanence of reefs once seemed assured. Reefs have been present throughout human history, and humans have relied on them for thousands of years. The idea that reefs could disappear seemed impossible until very recently. But in just the past few decades, the fate of reefs has become uncertain. Reefs that seemed permanent and unchanging are now threatened. This shift in our understanding of reef permanence has profound implications. The responsibility that comes with understanding the threats to reefs is heavy but also motivating. Now that we understand that reefs are threatened and why, we have a responsibility to act. Continuing to damage reefs while knowing the damage we cause would be indefensible. Acting to protect reefs is both necessary and meaningful. Meaningful action on behalf of reefs is available to everyone. Changes in consumption choices, political engagement, education, financial support for conservation, personal lifestyle choices, all can contribute to reef protection. The warmth of tropical water where reefs exist contrasts with the coldness and darkness of the deep ocean we explored in our previous journey. If the deep ocean is a place of pressure and darkness and cold, the reef is a place of light and warmth and color. Both are precious ecosystems deserving protection. Both show what extraordinary life can become when it's given the right conditions and sufficient time. The abundance of life in reefs contrasts with the sparseness of life in the surrounding tropical ocean. The reef is an oasis of abundance created by the symbiosis of coral and algae, by the efficiency of nutrient recycling, by millions of years of evolution. Understanding what creates this abundance is important for understanding ecology. Protecting the abundance of reefs is important for preserving one of the most remarkable ecosystems on Earth. The community aspect of coral reefs, the fact that thousands of species live together in coordination and competition, interdependence and predation, demonstrates the power of community. No single species creates the reef. The reef emerges from the interactions of countless species. This is true of ecosystems generally. They're not created by single species, but by communities of species interacting in complex ways. Appreciating this community aspect of ecosystems can help us understand that protecting ecosystems means protecting the communities, not just individual species. As you drift towards sleep after our journey through the coral reef, think about the abundance of life we've encountered. Think about the coral polyps, thousands of them building together, creating structure. Think about the fish in their thousands of species, each with their own adaptation and their own way of life. Think about the invertebrates in their endless diversity, sea stars and urchins and mollusks and sponges and countless others. Think about the tiny zooxanthellae in every coral polyp, providing energy through photosynthesis. Think about the reef not as a static thing, but as a dynamic community, constantly changing yet stable in its overall patterns. Fish hunt and are hunted. Corals build their skeletons and reproduce. Nutrients cycle through the community. Symbiosis and cooperation exist alongside predation and competition. The reef is a living whole greater than the sum of its parts. Think about the light in shallow reef water, the rays of sunlight penetrating the water and illuminating the reef below. Think about the colors, the reds and oranges and yellows and blues and purples of corals and fish and invertebrates. Think about the shadows created by branching corals and the crevices where creatures hide. Think about the clarity of the water, the visibility stretching meters in every direction, unlike the darkness of the deep ocean. Think about the warmth of tropical water, about the feeling of floating above the reef, looking down at this universe of life. Think about the peace of the coral reef despite the constant activity of predation and hunting and feeding and reproduction happening all around. Think about the timelessness of the reef, which has persisted essentially unchanged for thousands of years until very recently. The future of reefs depends on choices made now and in the coming years. The choices of governments about whether to limit greenhouse gas emissions. The choices of consumers about what products to buy and what activities to support. The choices of fishers about how much they fish and with what methods. The choices of industrial operators about whether to pursue reef-damaging practices. The choices of researchers about how to best support reef resilience. The choices of individual people about whether to care about reefs and take action to protect them. All these choices matter. The scale of the reef crisis is enormous. Thousands of reefs are being degraded simultaneously. Massive amounts of resources would be needed to restore all degraded reefs. But the scale of the human impact is also enormous. Humans have the capacity to damage ecosystems, and humans have the capacity to protect and restore them. The human effort to protect reefs has grown, and many people worldwide are now working to prevent reef loss and restore degraded reefs. This effort is inspiring. The possibility of a future where reefs are protected, where reef ecosystems are allowed to recover, where humans find ways to coexist with reefs sustainably, is real. This future is not assured, but it's possible. The choice between this future and a future where reefs largely disappear is, in many ways, in human hands. The responsibility is great, but so is the potential for positive action. Thank you for listening to Sleepy Lab Channel. If this journey through the coral reef helped you rest and brought you inspiration, please like and subscribe. It helps more dreamers find their way to the reef. You can return to the reefs anytime you need to find peace in a world of color and abundance and life. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the beauty of coral reefs.